G'day everyone, and welcome to this incredibly exciting new season of the CFStrong podcast. I'm your host and fellow CF patient, Bradley Dryborough, and as a 20-something-year-old living with cystic fibrosis, I know that this decade of our life is not only challenging, but rather it comes with some big questions we ask of ourselves. I've taken the time to sit down with 6 guests who, like me, are all in their 20s living with cystic fibrosis as they share their honest and unique perspectives on 10 big questions. Across 10 separate episodes, I'll ask one question of all 6 of our guests. In this particular order, you can expect to hear answers from Adam, Blake, Caitlin, Ellie, Sam and Taylor. In this 9th episode of our series, we'll hear from all 6 of our guests as they answer the question, do you have any fears or worries for the future while living with CF?
Yeah, I think it's actually, I do have fears and anxieties for the future, but it's not actually with me. I think it's with the CF community as a whole. I think I'm mostly really worried about people who are on modulators, people who aren't on modulators, and people who have tried modulators and it doesn't work for, having a really tough time, who are still really having a really tough time. You know, like I have a friend who is on modulators but is still very sick and I believe is about to go through a double lung transplant. So I think I'm just mostly worried about the community and the imbalances that can happen from modulators that people will feel really anxious about, or really the word is unfair. People will have that. There's a bit of unfairness happening across the board, and it's not anyone's fault. It's not. There's not really a way around it. But I do worry that people will be left behind.
I think everyone does, when you have that sort of lingering in the back of your mind, you do get those thoughts come up. I mean, I don't think it would be normal to never have those thoughts pop up. And it is something I struggle with. It's more of an existential issue, but when I try to think about it, I do try to think about it as logistically as possible. Again, it goes back to the finance stuff that, anything can happen at any time. And that's really out of my control. Aside from doing treatments and stuff, everything else, like you never know what's going to happen. So I think the best way to just, and again, back to the mental health stuff, is just I try to keep myself as busy as possible to sort of, keep those fears at the back of the mind. But yeah, I think everybody does. And that's, that's okay, I think, to have those fears. I think it's good to have those fears, really. If you're having those sort of thoughts and worries, it means that you're at least self-aware about what's going on. And that probably means you're going to be more inclined to try and fix it if something does pop up.
Not fears or worries as such. I think they're inevitable with CF. That is always at the back of all of our minds is, I guess, the shorter life expectancy. And I guess the only thing that, is a fear, like scares me about the future is the impact that would have on the people I love. One day if something were to happen to me, my mum, my sister, my partner, like I think how the impact on them is something that I will be honest, like I think about often, and that is what upsets me. But for myself, I guess it's not a fear or a worry, but I just really hope that like CF doesn't ever completely stop me from doing what I want in life. Like everything will take that little bit longer. It'll take the little bit longer to be into my dream career or to buy a house or to maybe start a family. But I would hope that I will always eventually get there. And I guess even though it is the inevitable, my life isn't cut short before I get to do everything I want to do and experience everything I want to do.
I have kind of mixed feelings. I think having known that, I guess, my life expectancy isn't as long, I've not really necessarily feared, I haven't feared that aspect of it. I think because that was probably so set from a young age that now all of the medication and the advancements, that now it's probably going to be a bit longer, having to figure out what that looks like beyond like the initial age that I was told. So I'm actually kind of like worried about getting older now because I hadn't necessarily had to think really beyond a certain point what that would look like. And I think that there are a lot of kind of personal decisions that I've made recently around my future that I'm fearful that, you know, if I met someone or something, that it might not also align with what they want as well. So just kind of to focus on myself.
Yeah, I think there's probably two main things. One being, I guess we talked about it earlier about relationships. A fear is, again, being in a relationship with someone you love, and I guess going through the highs and lows of CF with them. And maybe it's a really dark fear, obviously, but and honestly also probably not true. But I guess getting to a point in life where you get sick and you get really bad and it's not looking good. And I guess having someone you care about share that with you, that's a really big one for me that I'm still not over yet. But it might not ever happen. And that's the thing you got to realize. You can't not do something because you think something might happen. The other one is with like potential careers, living and working overseas. It's hard enough without CF, but then doing that kind of work in crazy places, dangerous places, and having that extra layer of CF, I guess, hovering over you. And again, if my body and mind are fit and healthy, everything should be fine. But like, you still can't really erase that fear in the back of your mind that something might come up. So they're the two things that kind of stick with me the most.
I think future and CF. I mean, I don't know if I'm the only one who's thinks of this, but like since being on track after, I was fully prepared before I knew I was going to die before everyone else. In 2020, my grandma, who I was very close with, I called her Gram, she passed from cancer. And I kind of realized, oh, frick, like everyone's going to drop like flies around me and I'm still going to be here. So like that's been my biggest fear for the future, because like I'm an only child as well. So it's like, oh, everyone's going to die and I'm going to have to watch it. Like, whoa, I didn't think of that before. I always knew I was going to go first. So I think that's a big fear, having to watch people pass away. Otherwise, like, track after's great. Like, for me, it's been great. But, like, what are the future side effects? That's also another fear where I'm like, well, what's going to happen? I've got a quick fix. It's great at the moment, but what else is going to develop down the future, like down that path?
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of our series. We thank you for taking the time to sit down and hear the value that each of our 6 guests provide, and we want to thank them for taking the time to be a part of the series too. We hope that this has not only been informative, but refreshing to hear that there are many different perspectives to each of these questions and challenges we face as CF patients. Once again, I'm your host, Bradley Drybra. Thank you so much for tuning in to the CFStrong podcast.